Giants and Drogs. A short story by Simon Orell. John and Jim were sitting as usual on their favourite rock, just a few hundred yards out of Big Town, the home of 100 or so giants. They were on the lookout for Jack, their new human friend, who had promised to visit this very afternoon. Jack was about halfway up the beanstalk and wishing he wasn't carrying such a heavy packed lunch. His mother, Matilda, said to Jack, before he set off up the long and winding vegetable, "I've packed some boiled eggs and a flask of hot tea, so don't forget to stop for a picnic, will you?" But Jack wasn't hungry. He was excited about seeing his giant friends again, and especially the giant princess, who was very pretty in a princessy sort of way. At last Jack reached the top and saw the sign which said, "Giant Land this way. Don't go the other way because nasty things hide behind the trees and bushes." Jack had been warned not to go the other way on his first visit to Giant Land. Exactly what nasty meant, Jack didn't know. So Jack followed the sign and within minutes spotted John and Jim sitting on their rock. "Hello, Jack," they said together. Was it a tough climb? Jack wondered how they managed to speak in perfect unison. They even coughed and sneezed together. "Well," said Jack, "I got my trousers stuck on a bit of beanstalk which was sticking out and nearly lost my packed lunch trying to free myself." Jack liked John and Jim. On his first visit they had shown him around Big Town and the children's playground. Of course, the swings and slides were too big for Jack to use, but he liked to watch the giant children play together. "Is the princess at home?" asked Jack eagerly. "I want to visit her." "I think the princess is going riding this afternoon, Jack," said John and Jim together. "She said High Horse needed exercising." Jack looked puzzled. "Is High Horse the name of the princess's horse, or are all the horses high horses?" said Jack. John and Jim thought for a moment and then said together, "The princess's horse is especially high, so she decided to call him High Horse. She has another horse who isn't so high. He is called Not So High Horse. The princess calls him Not So for short." Jack wondered if Not So would be low enough for him to ride. "Do you think I could go riding with the princess?" said Jack hopefully. "Why not?" chorused John and Jim. "If you're quick, you'll catch her at the palace before she sets off for the royal riding stables." Jack said farewell to his friends and started walking briskly towards the palace, a very nice building set on a little hill overlooking Big Town. Actually, in human terms, the hill was rather big, but as giant hills go, it was really just a mound. Still, the princess could gaze out of her bedroom window and watch the giant people walking around town. Big Town, like all of Giant Land, doesn't have any cars, buses or motorbikes. And quite strangely, there are no bicycles. The giants simply walk or run everywhere. Jack couldn't understand why the giants run around so fast, but John and Jim had explained that it was what they did. They liked running, and it meant they got things done quicker and had more time to play their favourite giant games. Jack reached the palace and knocked on the bottom of the door, the only part he could reach. The big door creaked and opened. Jack looked up and to his amazement saw the king towering above him, looking very kingly in his crown and red robes. "There's nobody here," shouted the king and started to close the door. "No, look down here, it's me, Jack," said Jack. Before the king could say anything, a voice shouted from above, "Jack, Jack, come in. Daddy, let Jack in, he's a special friend of mine." Once inside the palace, Jack was quick to ask the princess about Not So, the horse he hoped he would be small enough for him to ride. "Well," said the princess, "he is still very high for a human to ride, but we could give it a go." At the royal riding stables, Jack had to be lifted onto the horse by a giant stable girl called Sally. Sally, a red-faced girl, wanted to know all about humans and took quite a liking to Jack. "The humans all live at the bottom of the beanstalk," said Jack, rather matter-of-factly. "Are they all as small as you, Jack, and do they have horses?" Jack said that humans were indeed all small, and that yes, there were horses, but he also explained that humans were usually scared of giants, owing to the fact that giants were giant. "I'm the only human to have climbed the beanstalk," said Jack. "Anyway, nobody else knows about the beanstalk, apart from my mother." Sally, the stable girl, was quite bright and asked a rather obvious question. "So why don't the giants climb down the beanstalk to visit the humans? I mean, they know it's there, don't they? So they could do it." Jack didn't really know the answer, but said with some authority, "I think the beanstalk would break if a giant tried to climb down. It's a long way to fall." The explanation seemed to satisfy Sally. It turned out that Not So was a very friendly horse, and although Jack felt a little uneasy being so far off the ground, he enjoyed his first ever giant ride, without mishap. It was during the short ride that Jack asked the princess about the sign near the top of the beanstalk, the sign that said, "Don't go the other way because nasty things hide behind the trees and bushes." "What sort of nasty things?" asked Jack. "Drogs," answered the princess, and tapped her nose with a finger. "We giants don't have anything to do with drogs. They are not friendly, and they always sing out of tune." "Is that such a bad thing?" said Jack. "I mean, I'm not such a brilliant singer either. Are you a music lover?" The princess hesitated, and then replied, "Jack, don't ever go near them. If you ever hear them singing their silly songs, you must run. Promise me that you will run. Drogs sing out of tune before attacking you." "What do they look like?" said Jack, becoming more interested by the moment. "I mean, is it just the voices that put you off?" The princess felt that Jack wasn't taking her warning seriously at all. "Look, Jack, they talk very quickly, and then they start singing out of tune, badly out of tune, and then they attack. No giant has ever lived to tell what exactly happens, but—" "What songs do they sing? Do they play air guitar?" Jack was enjoying himself and beginning to fancy taking a look at these tone-deaf monsters. Just before Jack decided it was time to return home down the beanstalk, he told the princess he would definitely not be going on a drog hunt. The princess was pleased, but not totally convinced. On his way back to the top of the beanstalk, Jack passed the rock where John and Jim had earlier been sitting. They had gone home, but on the rock was a giant sign, which read, "Goodbye, Jack. Have a safe journey home." Jack reached the sign and looked closely at it. He read the words, "Nasty things that hide behind trees and bushes." "I wonder, shall I take a quick look?" thought Jack. No, he had promised the princess that he wouldn't. So, instead of heading off in the direction of the trees, he climbed instead onto the top of the beanstalk. Then, faintly in the distance, he heard two voices talking very quickly, followed by the worst singing Jack had ever heard. Jack didn't wait to hear any more. He quickly climbed down the beanstalk, hoping that the voices didn't get any louder. They didn't, and Jack got safely home. But in the safety of his own home, he couldn't help thinking about drogs. One day, he thought. Jack woke up in his bed the next morning and thought about nothing else but drogs. He told his mother all about Princess Lily and his trip to Giantland, and told her he had to go back at the weekend to visit the giant forest where the drogs lived. "But Jack, aren't the drogs dangerous?" said his mother quietly. "Yes," said Jack, "but I only want to get a quick look at one, that's all. I'll be careful." The weekend soon arrived, and Jack set off up the beanstalk with another packed lunch, this time corned beef and milk. He was so excited that he didn't stop for a rest, and he was soon at the top. After climbing onto Giantland, Jack walked to the path and up to the sign. Instead of walking towards John and Jim's rock, he walked towards the trees, the home of the mysterious drogs. Jack wondered why the giants were so frightened of the drogs. Giants, after all, were very tall and very brave, and they could run very quickly when they wanted to. After about 15 minutes, Jack reached the forest. It was there where he crept along quietly. Suddenly, out of the corner of an eye, he saw something move. Oh no, he thought, the Drogs have spotted me. Sure enough, Jack heard two voices talking very quickly, followed by some very poor singing. Jack thought he knew the song, but it was so out of tune he wasn't sure. Then suddenly, two creatures that Jack assumed were Drogs poked their heads out from behind the two trees. Jack stood still, waiting for the attack. But that didn't happen. No. Instead, the Drogs, who were singing again, walked right up to Jack and stood in front of him. Hello, stammered Jack. I'm Jack, and I'm a human. Pleased to meet you. Jack held out his hand. The two Drogs stopped singing, which was a relief to Jack, and started nodding their heads up and down. Jack nodded back, and to his amazement, they smiled at him. Jack saw that the Drogs were a little smaller than the Giants, and they had hair all over their bodies. But they looked sort of human, and their faces were long. They had grey beards. Nice to meet you, Jack, said one of the Drogs. He spoke in a soft voice and at normal speed. Jack said, But you normally speak very quickly. Yes, but only when we are speaking to one another, said the second Drog. Jack said, I don't wish to be rude, but do you always sing and whistle out of tune? Don't worry, said the first Drog. To us, it isn't out of tune. Anyway, we have heard the Giants sing, and that sounds horrible to us. Jack wondered how the Drogs had heard the Giants sing. The Giants never came into the forest, and the Drogs never ventured into Big City. I know what you're thinking, said the first Drog. You know, once upon a time, the Giants and the Drogs lived together in caves in the Giant Hills. We got on well together. Then one day there was a big argument between the king of the Giants and the king of the Drogs, and the Giants moved out of the caves. They went away and built Big City. Now they live in houses. But we Drogs like our caves, and we like the forest. One day our king went to visit Big City. He wanted to tell the Giants that the Drogs wanted to be friends, but he never returned. We don't know what happened to him, and ever since, the Giants and Drogs have not spoken. That was many years ago, and the Giant children are now taught that Drogs are nasty and dangerous, and the children of the Drogs are told never to go near Big City. Jack said, Did the Giants move out of the caves because of your singing? He thought about having to listen to it all day. The Drogs looked at one another and slowly shook their heads. It was more serious than that, said the first Drog. The two kings could not agree with each other. They always argued. Jack suddenly had an idea. Why didn't he try to act as peacemaker? He could take a message from the Drogs to the princess in Big City. He was sure she would help. Jack explained his plan to the two Drogs. After all, the old kings had died many years ago. Perhaps the two new kings could get on much better.